So in a nutshell, the standards for RTOs 2015 are the key regulatory requirement for all RTOs in Australia. So most people working at TAFE or private providers are probably aware that this is one of the key things that gets quoted by compliance managers or your boss or your manager, because it really does, the requirements set out in this bit of legislation really govern what we do, either as trainers and assessors or how the actual institute is run. And it really influences a lot of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. It's a very important regulatory instrument. A bit of a background, over the last couple of years, they have been reviewing these standards to determine some changes, and they're due to be released in 2025. So there's been a whole lot of research done, a lot of feedback, a lot of consultation and engagement with the sector and other stakeholders, and there's been a lot of things identified that they could do to improve, and they're still in the pipeline. They're still kind of getting done. However, there were some things that were identified pretty early on that the skills ministers basically agreed to. They went, hey, look, these things are a priority. And they were basically things that were done, that were changed in order to relieve some of the workforce pressures that were on RTOs. Probably the biggest one that certainly I'm aware of as being someone who's involved in delivery of the Cert IV in training and assessment is the challenges that RTOs are having in finding good trainers and assessors. There is a shortage of good trainers and assessors. And it's, as you can appreciate, it's one of those things where someone who teaches at an RTO and who conducts assessment, they don't just have to be a good teacher and a good assessor. They also have to be an industry experienced professional. If you think about the people that should be up in front of a class of students and teaching them something, they really need to be an expert in, an industry expert. That's very, very important. So RTOs tend to really struggle to find that kind of holy grail of combination of someone having both their Certificate IV in training and assessment plus being an industry expert. So that was one of the key features of these advanced changes that they sort of rushed in, because there was a lot of pressure on RTOs to find that holy grail of trainers and assessors, as well as being an industry expert. So the session today will look at an overview of the key changes that affect RTOs. I've got some suggestions to make on what you might consider as when you're putting in place some changes as a result of these new standards or updated standards. And then we'll have the Q&A session. And just a bit of a disclaimer, for the sake of keeping this nice and simple and not overburdening you with text, I've simplified the language somewhat. So, for example, I might give examples of certain qualifications or certain bullet points, but to get the full, I guess, the full information, I've provided a link here, and I'll just pop it in the chat now. There we go, there's a link. This is probably the best source and most direct source of information on these changes. So it's at dwa.gov.au, and they've got a section where they list, and also a Q&A, so frequently asked questions section as well. So what I'm delivering here is for the sake of putting it in as much plain English as possible. But if you really want to check the full details, then you really should go to that, to DWA's website to make sure you're getting the full facts. So by way of a quick overview on the key changes, number one, they've relaxed the requirements for training under supervision. So as many of you are aware, people who are industry experts who maybe want to get into becoming a trainer and assessor have previously had to meet certain requirements to be deemed appropriate to teach under supervision. They've actually relaxed that requirement a little bit more. So they've made it so that there's some additional skill sets that people can hold so that they can teach under supervision. They've also made it so that someone can teach at an RTO under supervision while actively working towards the Certificate IV in training and assessment. So that means they don't have to hold any skill set. They can be enrolled in the Cert IV. So there's some additional requirements under that, but basically someone could enroll in a Certificate IV and kick it off and start working towards their first unit 1 week and then start training and assessing the next week. So it's pretty relaxed, but as we'll discuss later on, there's some additional requirements to add into that. There's also, I think school teachers will be pretty happy about this. Secondary school teachers may not need to get the Cert IV anymore. So there's some additional requirements about that. We'll talk about that. And I think a welcome, at least a bit of relief to a lot of people, is there's no requirement to upgrade to the new TAE40122. There never has been, but I think a lot of people were kind of looking at these new standards going, oh, is this gonna be a thing? You know, am I gonna have to upgrade? You know, they say that we don't have to now, but what are they gonna do, you know, when they put through these changes? So I think this further reinforces the fact that I don't expect there to be any expectation to upgrade to TAE40122. So that's pretty good news. So that's it in a nutshell. Let's now dig into some of these points in a little bit more detail. Also this point here, this is from the Department of Education and Workplace Relations. They've basically said that the changes are, this is an interesting term, expansionist in nature. They seek to provide greater flexibility and should not impose any additional regulatory burden on RTOs. Now, I've been through them myself, and because, you know, as an RTO ourselves, we are also subject to the requirements of these standards, and I'm quite confident that there's nothing. You know, if you're happy with the way things are going and you feel like you meet all the requirements for the RTO, for the standards for RTOs as it stands, there's no changes here that would really affect you if it's sort of business as usual. So there's nothing you need to go and change necessarily in your policies and procedures or anything like that. It tends to just open up a few more possibilities. Okay, so one of the first key changes is that the TAE40122, the new version of the Cert IV in training and assessment, and the new version of the diploma, the TAE diploma, have been added in as credentials. So previously, of course, the 2015 version was written before this qualification existed, so it wasn't written into it. So it was basically said the TAE40116 or its successor. And now it's TAE40122 or its successor and a few other things. But notably, of course, they haven't removed TAE40116, so that's still explicitly stated. And also TAE40110, what I might call the Holy Trinity, the TAE40110 plus the LLN unit plus the assessment tools unit have not been removed. So those who are still, you know, who hold that 40116 version or even that 40110 version and have done those additional units, you're still good. Okay, so it's all, there's no necessity, at least under these regulations, to upgrade. What we have noticed is some, I see it mostly within certain TAFE institutes, they have, even though the standards say you don't need to upgrade, they might have still required some of their teachers to get the new version. I don't quite know what's going on there, but it's sort of one of those hearsay things. But at least this is what the official regulations state. Just to really further reassure people, because they're, you know, being a TAE provider, we do take a lot of calls from people who are a little bit worried about this. You know, do I have to upgrade? Oh my gosh, I only just upgraded only a year ago or 12 months ago. I only just upgraded. Do I need to do it again? This is crazy. So they've really, and you can, at that link that I put into the chat, if you go there, you'll see this quote. It says specifically, trainers and assessors who currently meet the requirements of the standards will not be required to update their qualifications. So that's good. Now, here's the interesting one. Train under supervision if actively working towards the Cert 4. So this is a really interesting one. Previously, someone who wants to become a trainer and assessor, and they're an industry specialist, maybe they're a highly qualified and experienced hairdresser or diesel mechanic, or you work in the public safety sector, or whatever it is, and they maybe get invited to come and work at an RTO. Hey, you've been doing this for 20 years, you're really experienced, we'd love to have you come and become a trainer at our RTO. And they say, that sounds great, I've always wanted to be a teacher, I'd really love to give back to my industry. And then the RTO says, well, there's one catch, you have to do your Cert 4 in training and assessment. And when they start looking into it and realizing, okay, it's a fairly detailed qualification, it's got 12 units, it might take me a while to do. Gee, this is actually, that barrier of me being where I am now and then finally achieving my Cert 4 it's going to be a long time before I can actually teach. And previously, it was allowable to do some of the skill sets, some of the building blocks that form part of the Cert 4 in training and assessment, which would then allow them to teach under supervision. But now they've relaxed that even further and said that someone who is actively working towards the Certificate 4 in training and assessment can deliver training and contribute to assessment under supervision. Now, they've been very clear about this wording. They've even put it in the glossary to clarify what it means to be actively working towards the Cert 4. And I think this is very, very important for anyone who's here today who runs an RTO or who's, the compliance manager or whatever, a senior person in the RTO. Be really careful with this one, because on first glance, it kind of looks like, oh yeah, we just check, get someone to enroll in a Cert 4 and then give us your confirmation of enrollment, and then you can be teaching the next day, basically. Now, that might work for a couple of weeks, but they are pretty clear in kind of making sure that it's not just enrolled and kind of being a ghost student at a Cert 4, in a Cert 4. They really make it clear that you've got to be actively working towards that Cert 4. So what does that mean? It means they've enrolled, yes, but they've also commenced training. So they've got to show they've actually started doing some work in the qualification. And they've also said that they need to be making satisfactory progress to enable the credential to be completed within 2 years from commencement. So while it might seem at first glance really easy to tick the box and get underway within a couple of weeks at an RTO, you're getting your cert, you're just enrolled in your Cert 4, you're an industry experienced professional, and you start teaching classes under supervision for a couple of weeks, there's that thing that kind of happens. Everyone gets busy, everyone forgets, oh, we've got to make sure we're actively working towards, and it's been a while and I haven't turned up to my classes, or I haven't done anything for my Cert 4. And then suddenly 12 months has passed, and then an audit happens, or a performance assessment happens from the regulator. ASC will come in and they say, hey, look, you've got these trainers here that are under supervision that you've said are actively working towards their Cert 4. Can you show us that they're actively working towards it? And then you check in with them and go, hey, ASC was coming. Have you been working towards your Cert 4? You have, haven't you? Please tell me you've been working towards your Cert 4. And they say, yeah, I have. Okay, can you prove it? And they haven't really got anything to show for it. So I think it would be very difficult to demonstrate to any kind of regulatory activity or any kind of regulatory scrutiny that a trainer is actively working towards a Cert 4 if they've been teaching and doing all that kind of stuff, but they haven't achieved any units. So you'd want to have some kind of plan in place. some kind of regular check-ins, requirements that they've done maybe a certain number of units within 6 months or 12 months, so that you can see that it's actually being actively worked towards. What could this look like? I would suggest, and given that, you know, as a provider of TAE, we're going to need to be providing some of this evidence to people. I know people will be asking about this, so we've taken the time to kind of think about what that might look like. I would say that something like a combination of these things. So an official enrolment letter, plus or a progress letter. So it might not be just you've enrolled, but it might be a letter on the RTOs letterhead that says, hey, Jane Kowalski is working towards the Certificate IV in Training assessment, has achieved these units, has attended these classes, something like that. The trainer who is under supervision might show some evidence of feedback from their TAE trainer on some of the tasks they've completed, showing that they're actually, yeah, I'm doing my assessments, I'm doing the activities, or I'm showing up to my workshops. They might source from the, I know for our students, we often do an interim transcript. It's not too difficult to do. We can just it's basically just a printout or a PDF that shows what units have been achieved so far, which can be great evidence towards completion. It's got the dates and everything. And I think, yeah, they basically need to be able to demonstrate in some way or other that they're making that satisfactory progress, that it's actually happening. Okay, so they've expanded the skill set. So now we've talked about the fact that you can teach under supervision while working towards your Cert IV within a couple of years. But they've also added some additional skill sets that allow people to teach under supervision. So here they are on the screen. I don't really need to read through them. But these are the key skill sets that have been added in, that if held, you can teach under supervision. There is some wording in there that says that the skill set, these TAE skill sets need to be relevant to the context or the nature of vet training. So for example, you can see their volunteer trainer and delivery assessment contribution skill set and volunteer trainer delivery skill set. So that would be really good for, say, you know, we work a lot with the Rural Fire Service, for example, who has a massive volunteer workforce. You know, these are people that are highly experienced firefighters and you know, may not be doing enough training and assessing. It might be something that they just do once a month on a weekend to their local fire brigade. And for them, it doesn't really make sense at this stage that they go and do the whole Cert IV. So they might do the volunteer trainer delivery skill set. And that's relevant to what they're, you know, this type of teaching that they're doing. Or there's the young learner delivery skill set if they're mostly delivering to young learners. So that's good that it's opened up a few more opportunities there as well. I know the chat, there's a lot going on in the chat at the moment. Thank you for your participation. I'll check that in a moment, but just for the continuity and also for the recording, I'll keep going through this. All right, so here's my suggestions. If you're going to employ someone under supervision who is working towards their Cert IV or who holds one of these skill sets, you really need to have a robust supervision plan in place. You need to have specific written requirements and expectations in place for those who are actively working towards a Cert IV. So don't be caught off guard like the example I gave before. And put it in writing so that it's not just, you know, 12 months later, you go back to them and they haven't done any work towards their Cert IV and, you know, why didn't you do this Cert IV? You should have been... Make it a more regular check-in and put it in writing so that everyone understands and it's very clear and there's no confusion. Have those regular reviews as part of employment and supervision arrangements. And I think it's a good idea that the trainer does complete a skill set anyway as a kind of a backup. And they're really clear in the standards that the supervisor must be accountable for what the supervised trainer and assessor does. So if you are a teacher, a trainer and assessor who does hold their full Cert IV, and you've been asked to supervise one of these trainers and assessors who only has the skill set or who is actively working towards their Cert IV, as the supervisor, you're accountable for what they do. You're accountable for what they do in the classroom and the way they contribute to the assessment. So that's why when we go further up, not just for the supervisor, but for the RTO, who is ultimately responsible for all of this and ultimately accountable, make sure that those supervision plans are nice and robust. Now, for anyone who's any RTOs that are looking to implement this kind of thing, we actually, I guess because we work with a lot of providers, we have a template that you can use. It's free. It's on our website. I'll pop the link in the chat later on, but you can see it there anyway. A bit of a long one to type in, but that's basically got a link to both a supervision plan template and it's been updated to include these new requirements. It's quite easy to follow. It's been used by quite a few RTOs and it's gone through their audit processes and everything else. So you're welcome to that. And also a policy excerpt as well. If you haven't got anything in your policies and procedures system that deals with supervision, there's a bit of a starting point. Now, again, this is not going to guarantee you compliance or anything like that, but it might just help you, give you a bit of a foot up if you haven't really engaged a trainer under supervision before. So you're welcome to that. This one's cool. I like this one because I talk to people a lot on the phone who are calling up and inquiring about the Certificate IV in Training and Assessment. And, that's saying about shooting the messenger. Well, as the messenger of the requirements, I've been shot many, many times by school teachers, by secondary school teachers especially, who have got their teaching qualifications, they're regularly teaching, and then they're required to go and get their Cert IV. And it's probably quite upsetting. They've gone to university for 4 years, they're very experienced, but then they're told, I have to go and do my whole Cert IV. It's very difficult to do to map RPL from the Cert IV into the teaching qualifications. Because it's very difficult, especially from anything from higher education, to put it to competency-based training. So yeah, it's a challenging one. So this basically, the wording is, those who hold a qualification that enables registration as a secondary school teacher in any state or territory would be able to deliver training in any vet context under supervision. Okay, so basically just demonstrate that you're a qualified school teacher, a secondary school teacher, and you can teach at an RTO under supervision. If you want to be a secondary school teacher that doesn't have their Cert IV but doesn't have supervision, then you can do some skill sets. So basically, there's the requirement to do it under supervision, but if you get the assessor skill set or it's a bit of a mouthful, this one, vet delivered to school students teacher enhancement skill set, you can then teach under supervision according to these amendments to the standards. So a high school teacher that has the assessor skill set or this other skill set can basically exercise, can basically work just as if they hold a Cert IV in Training and Assessment without supervision. So that's an interesting one. They've clarified on use of industry experts. So industry experts may also assist in delivery and or assessment judgment, working alongside the trainer and assessor to conduct the training or assessment. So this has always been a requirement in there, but they've expanded it now so that the industry expert can also assist in training delivery and the assessment judgment. So they give a very vague example of what that looks like, which is providing feedback or observation as part of the assessment process. Very, very important to clarify that only qualified assessors can make assessment judgments. So the industry expert cannot be the one that decides whether the student is competent or not. That must be the qualified assessor, though they can contribute to that process. They can provide observations and feedback and all those sorts of things. Okay, just a couple of other minor changes and then we'll move into the Q&A session. So they've relaxed the requirement for validation. So previously in assessment validation, if you were the teacher and the assessor of a course that is being validated, you were not permitted to be involved in the validation. That was to preserve, I guess, the integrity of the validation process. Now they have said that they've made it so that people involved in the delivery of the training and assessment can also be involved in the validation process, provided they are not solely responsible for determining the validation outcome. So it needs to be in conjunction with another trainer and assessor who wasn't involved in it. And another minor change is they've changed the definition of in the glossary section. They've changed the definition of education and support services to include well-being services as a type of support service that an RTO may provide. So they've really just clarified some wording on that. Nothing, there's no additional requirements or anything as a result of that. So that's the key changes. Oh, look at that, 1:30 on the dot. So I've kept to my promise of keeping it as short and simple as possible. So now we're going to go to a bit of a Q&A, and I'm very, very pleased that I could get someone to come along and hang out with me for this session. And I have from another RTO, I have Patsy Green, who's the compliance manager at Fireground, and should I also mention, New South Wales Small Training Provider of the Year. So we have a good source of information here. And maybe we just kick this Q&A session off, or a mini panel session off, by asking you, Patsy, in your RTO, what's your initial reactions to these changes?
Well, when I first read it, Paul, I thought, wow, how is this really going to make any difference? But since then, we've actually hired a new potential trainer assessor who's currently enrolled to do his Cert 4 with you. And being able to send him out under supervision starting tomorrow is absolutely, it's going to really help us. Because, yeah, like a lot of RTOs, we struggle to get good trainers with the industry experience.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is going to be great.
Oh, that is good to hear. I know from having I've participated in a few kind of validation and panel things with your RTO over the years, and it just blows me away at it's just some of the units that you deliver there at Fireground are so specialized. Like some of those ones where you've got what was the last one we did, was an incendiaries in aircraft. You know, the level of expertise of having someone who has, you know, worked in aircraft operating these incendiary devices during, you know, fire seasons and everything else. It's such a specialist area that finding there must be, in some of these units must only be a small handful of people in the entire country who are actually, you know, considered industry experts.
Yeah, so, that's true. And we have most of them, but they're all heading towards retirement.
Okay.
And the struggle is finding replacements, and this is going to help.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, we can bring in new people under the current trainers for supervision and get them up to where we need them.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Patsy. I'm just going to go through the chat here and just see what some of the questions are, because I just wanted to get through the initial bit of information. If there's anything in here, Patsy, that you want to comment on, just feel free to jump in. All right, so let's get down here. Okay, Shveta says, so TAE 16 stands current. Yes, so someone who holds TAE 40116, confirming yes, they can still, they don't need to upgrade. Sharon says, sounds a bit too good to be true. Okay, Sharon, you've said, is it only the Cert 4 TAE 40116 or TAE 40122, or can they work under supervision if they are studying, say, graduate certificate in adult vocational education through university? Oh, I don't know. I think the standards, I'll have to check. If I get a moment in a little bit later on, I'll definitely check that one. I don't think so. I think they've made it really clear that it's either the Cert 4 or the diploma. But I'll double check that. Good question. Is it actively working towards TAE1622 if upgrading from TAE10? Yes, I'd say so. I'd say, yeah, that meets the requirement. Michelle, you've said, oh, thank you for jumping in there, Michelle, and answering that question to Sharon. Okay, that's good. I probably should have read a bit further down. When you're already a qualified teacher with NESA, why do we need to complete Cert for TAE? It's doubling up. Can someone with more, I don't know what NESA is. Can you clarify what that means in the chat, and I'll come back to it? Janine?
That's the body they have to be registered with to be a teacher, a secondary teacher.
Oh, thanks, Patsy. Okay. They did actually clarify something. I'm just going to switch out of my slides here, and I'm going to, I probably should share my screen again. I'm going to jump into there's a frequently asked questions section. So they talk about, okay. Okay, so I think this might answer it. Do individuals have to be currently registered as a secondary school teacher to deliver training and assessment? Individuals with a qualification that enables registration as a secondary school teacher do not need to be currently registered. So they don't need to be currently registered. They only need to meet the academic requirements for registration as a secondary school teacher in at least one state or territory. Yeah, there's some more information about how current must they be. Yeah, so that's, hopefully that covers that. Janine, you've asked, what is the definition of supervision? They're very vague about the definition of supervision. I think they put something, what's the wording? Let me just find it here in the page. Okay, so this is it, Janine. What level of supervision is required for people actively working towards a credential? RTOs will need to determine an appropriate level of supervision and any conditions or restrictions necessary based on the individual and where they're up to, noting the level of supervision is likely to evolve as the individual progresses. So I think what they're saying there is, you know, in the early stages, you probably have really intensive supervision. As they gain their skills and knowledge of how the RTO works and their compliance obligations and everything, maybe they start to pull that back a little bit. And here's that thing that I mentioned before. The RTO will also need to ensure that trainers providing supervision monitor and are accountable for the training and assessment undertaken by the person under their supervision. So it's pretty vague. That plan that I mentioned before is pretty useful in kind of making the supervision arrangements robust enough. So I've got it here on my screen if you want to have a quick look at it. So there's a bunch of questions there, you know, yes, no, yes, no. You kind of can note where they're doing their course. You can rate their current level of delivery. And then there's some section here where you actually identify the supervision arrangement with some examples. So, you know, it says an example adjusted to be relevant, but it could be a meeting between the trainer and the supervisor will be held before each session to confirm delivery arrangements, discuss any issues. A supervisor will periodically observe performance. A debriefing is held after each session. When deemed appropriate by the supervisor, the meetings and debriefings will reduce to a weekly review with mentoring and support available. Patsy, what would you be comfortable sharing some of the ways that you supervise your trainers?
Yeah, so with our new guy, the way we started is he was actually a student at a course just before Christmas, and he pretty much could have stood up and actually run the session just with his knowledge. So we approached him after that about becoming a trainer. He's enrolled in his TAE. Now, tomorrow, he's actually attending a course that one of our very senior trainers is conducting in Grafton. He'll attend and assist through that course. Next week, he's actually going to go to another training course with the same trainer, and he is going to run some of those sessions under supervision.
Yep. Okay.
And that's pretty much the same way that I did my TAE. I went along, I helped with several courses with different trainers, and then I picked out sessions, I conducted them under their supervision.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that. It's very much, I feel like really ties in nicely with the, what we teach about scaffolding. You go along and you're the student, and then you're the observer, and then maybe you deliver a little bit with the main trainer delivering most of it, and then slowly that support is pulled away, that supervision and guidance is pulled away gradually as their skills increase. And I'm guessing as the RTO, you satisfy yourselves that they're progressing nicely and meeting the requirements and doing well. And eventually, once they get their Cert 4, they're going to be really hitting the ground running then, which is good. Benedict, you've said, does it work vice versa? So the TAE holder can teach as a secondary school teacher? No. I am very unfamiliar with that territory, but I don't know enough about it, but I'm pretty sure that would be no. Danny, I think you've asked pretty much the same thing. What if the vet trainer assessor was to deliver in a school? Unless you're talking about vet in schools, I think vet in schools is just subject to the same regulatory requirements as any other RTO. Do you have any thoughts? I'll just stop my sharing there just so we can go on the screen. Any thoughts, any insights into assessors, assessment only people? So they need the new assessor skill set, or could be run under the old skill set. I believe the old skill set is still written into the standards. How does assisting in assessment look, Karen? So it's pretty vague, but they've basically said, I think the wording I had up there before is I think it's something like may assist with assessments or may contribute to the assessment process. And they give an example, it's only one example, which is providing assistance with observations and providing feedback to the students. So I think given the risk factors around assessment, it's really, I think we need to be careful. I really love the idea of having people under supervision doing training, and running training and maybe even providing feedback towards assessments. But when it comes to actually signing off, especially on any kind of risky unit, whether it be, working with children, working with elderly people, working anything to do with fire, Patsy, aircraft, working at heights, confines, any of those sort of risky things, chemicals, electricity. I think we just really make sure we have qualified assessors, properly qualified in accordance with the standards, and it's probably just the safest way to go about it. And Philip, I probably should read ahead. Philip, you've clarified that one. Thank you. Will a potential assessor receive the same payment? I guess that's up to the RTO to decide. Lynn, you've said you've had 30 years in logistics, currently completing diploma in logistics, currently hold all TAEs from 2009 to 16, and need an online face-to-face. I think if you hold TAE 40116, Lynn, you meet the current requirements and don't need to do any further training. What about the trainer? Does he need to possess all the units before supervising? Yes, the trainer needs to be a fully qualified trainer and assessor. Lucas, you've asked, can secondary teachers lecture in TA or in any other vocational unit of competency, as one of the slides state, deliver training in any vet context under supervision? There are some additional requirements in the standards for teachers who actually teach the TAE units. So you'd need to check that specifically what they are, but basically they want a level of expertise behind the trainer and assessor delivering the TAE units. Do you have the supervision template? Yes, I do. I'll pop it in the chat now. Here's the link. Just give me a moment. Okay, so there's a link to the supervision template. Glenn, you've asked, does this impact the ability of a trainer to provide third-party validation of resources? I don't think so. Sharon, you've asked, there's nothing. Okay, so there's nothing. Yeah, so that's good. I mean, that just reaffirms that I think these changes don't really restrict any RTOs, but just add additional freedoms, additional possibilities that might make things a little bit easier for you, which is good. Okay, all right. I think there's no further questions. Patsy, did you have any final thoughts or comments to add on it?
Not really. I think you've covered it really well, Paul, as you always do.
Okay.
I'm just really interested to see the other two documents come with the new draft revised standards to see how they really all fit together.
Yeah, that's right. It'll be really interesting to see that. I'll just add in another thought. I tried to invite a couple of other panelists from other providers to come along and join in on the discussion today. But of course, it was such short notice. I sent about 5 emails out on the weekend. And so I didn't actually think anyone would join me. So I'm very grateful that you joined me today, Patsy. So thank you. But I did get an email from another one of my colleagues over in Western Australia at an RTO called Health Science Hub, Natalie. And Natalie just wanted to add in something about where someone can work under supervision when they're doing their Cert 4, when they've just enrolled. And she said that this means they could basically start training and assessment from day one of enrollment in the TAE. Not that this would happen, but, thinking of the limits. So we hire John Doe, who has extensive experience in the lab, for example, and he enrolls in the TAE from day one. He can train and assess under supervision. This one doesn't make too much sense, as they might not hit their assessor skill set for months. Whilst I think this is very helpful to RTOs who are struggling to find staff, I think it could end up creating more work for the RTO to manage the process, as they might be missing key skills and knowledge in the beginning. So Natalie's really just reinforcing there the need to set up milestones and to watch and monitor very, very closely to make sure they're making progress. So I think really that's just a further affirmation, a further confirmation from the RTO manager's perspective that, hey, look, if we do this stuff, if we do supervise these new people who are just starting out with their Cert 4, that supervision needs to be very tight, very specific, very well documented, and very closely monitored.
And that's also where a good relationship with the RTO providing the TAE
is
really good.
Yes, 100% agree with that. And I find that the situations where we have really awesome relationships with our clients, where we get to talk to them on a regular basis, provide feedback to the senior management on progress, usually results in a very fruitful kind of outcome for finding and retaining really good trainers. Thanks, Patsy. Well, I think we'll leave it there. And as always, I love continuing the conversation. So if anyone has any follow-up thoughts that they didn't think of during the session, you're welcome to reach out to me. We'll do a little certificate of attendance for your own PD records as a thank you for coming along. So thank you. And I wish you all the very best as you go forth out there into the world of training. Thank you.